John, we can begin in 3, 2, 1.
I'll now call to order the virtual meeting, the Planning Advisory Committee. I will begin by reading the land acknowledgement statement. On November 2nd, 2022, we acknowledge that this sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been the site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together we can care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of the nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. All participants are asked to keep microphones on mute and cameras off during staff and consultant presentations. There will be an opportunity for the public and committee members to ask questions following the presentation this evening. If you have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. I am John Wanless, Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. I will now take attendance of our committee members and staff. Please raise your hand or declare your presence when I call your name. Jacqueline Grimes.
Present.
Councillor Wendy Alford.
Present.
Bill Widdenmeyer.
Present.
Councillor Jay Brennan.
Present.
Stephen McGuire.
Present.
Senior Planner Carl Grinke.
Present.
Planner 1 Richard Grant.
Present.
Planning Clerk Mary Remig.
Present.
And Jack Anderson sends his regrets. To review, committee members are asked to raise their hands when they wish to speak. Alternatively, please find an appropriate opportunity at any available time to notify the chair verbally if you wish to speak. We'll now carry on with our agenda. Can I have a motion for the approval of the agenda? Moved by Jacqueline, seconder. Second by Jay. All in favor? Carried. Adoption of minutes. Firstly, the Planning Advisory Committee meeting, September 8th, 2022. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Bill, seconded by Wendy. All in favor? Carried. The second one, Planning Advisory Committee meeting, October 13th, 2022. Can I have a motion? Moved by Jay, seconded by Wendy. All in favor? Carried. Disclosure of any monetary interests. Okay, we'll now move to the public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. Please be advised you may leave this virtual meeting at any time. Applicants, agents, members of the public logged into to participate in the public meeting are asked to please keep their microphones on mute and cameras off until called on by the chair. If you wish to speak to an application and have not signed in with the recording secretary, please speak now. The purpose of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting is to consider a minor variance for application MV-22-03 for 35 Van Horn Avenue. The application seeks relief from section 4.28.10 of the zoning bylaw to accommodate and reduce aisle width of 6 meter adjacent 90 90-degree angled parking spaces. This meeting is your opportunity to provide any feedback on this application, and the Planning Advisory Committee welcomes any questions and comments you may have. We encourage you to do so at this public meeting, as the Planning Act rules suggest that the public's ability to voice objectives later in the process may be limited if a written or oral comment is not submitted. The committee is the approval authority for minor variance applications, and the committee will review and consider all feedback regarding the proposal to inform their decision on the application. I will now pass the meeting over to Planner 1, Richard Grant, to report on the notification and summary of application MV-22-03. Following the presentation, I will call on any public participants one at a time to offer feedback, comments, or questions regarding the proposal. The applicant will also be provided an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the committee by the public. Richard?
Okay, thank you. Let me start my slideshow. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the public meeting for the minor variance application for 35 Van Horn Avenue. Next slide, please. The applicant proposes a 3-story 24-unit apartment complex on 35 Van Horn Avenue. They're seeking a relief of 0.7 meters to have a 6-meter driving aisle width. The proposed development has already been approved in September 2020 for a zoning amendment for increased density. For the zoning bylaw, approves a 6.7 meter parking aisle width for angled parking over 75 degrees. Next slide, please. Here's a diagram of a driving aisle width that's found in the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. And here is the subject property highlighted in black. Next slide, please. And here is a site plan of the proposed development. Now, the gray rectangular shape is the proposed apartment complex, and on to the right side, on the slanted side, is where the parking stalls are. Next slide, please. And here are some site visit photos that were taken on the day on our site visit on October 21st. And it is a green vacant property with a sloping back end with trees at the right end. And to the left is the nursing home. And to the right, that's not pictured, is the townhomes on the adjacent townhomes. Next slide, please. The purpose of public meetings is to involve the community in considering a change in land use rules and regulations for a given parcel of land. Next slide, please. Here is a summary of the feedback received. Department of Public Works are of the view that the 6-meter driving aisle width is acceptable after reviewing of the minor variance application and supporting documents by Castle Glen Consultants. The CBO is also of the view that the aisle width is operational, but fire access routes must be demonstrated as a condition of approval on the site plan. Next slide, please. Now here is a summary of the engineering report written by Castle Glen. The diagram pictured on the right is a sample car that fits the Transportation Association of Canada design standards and is larger than the typical SUVs and 4x4s. Now, what's noted on the slide is the dimensions of a BMW, which would give you a bit of an idea of what the dimensions of the car would be. So the dimension would be 5.15 meters in length, 2 meters wide, and 1.8 meters in height, with an actual spacing of 3.1. Also, they have provided evidence that other municipalities have a 6.6 meter driving aisle width, such as Ottawa, North York, and Hamilton. Next slide, please. Now here they have given us a diagram that shows us how the car would be driving into the aisle width, as well as backing out of the aisle width. Now, the reason why they chose parking stall number 2 was to show us the most likely area what would have the most difficulty. And by demonstrating that the car can fit into parking stall number 2, by virtue of the logic, everything else would be much easier. Next slide, please. And here is the same design car moving out of the parking stall. Next slide, please. Now here is a summary of the public feedback. Town residents are of the view that the relief of 6 meters does not provide adequate turnaround, especially for larger vehicles. Additionally, they have raised privacy concerns over the proximity of the improved amenity area on the subject property. They have also raised additional concerns about the potential development having negative impacts on the structure of their homes, as well as the general well-being, and also the reduced safety and increased traffic that would come with the property being developed where it is. They have the view that there has not been adequate information provided about the development, and the nature of development is considered undesirable. Next slide, please. Now here are 4 tests that the Planning Act requires to determine if a minor variance is acceptable. Next slide, please. The first test is, does it meet the general intent of the official plan? The application does not relate to nor affect the general intent of the official plan. However, public feedback is an important component of the site plan requirements. So all public feedback is recorded as noted for public record. Next slide, please. Now, the second test is if the general intent of the zoning bylaw is maintained. The applicant requests relief of 7 meters. And the subject property sits within a constrained site, and applicant contends that the minimum aisle width of 6 meters for angled parking over 75 degrees is necessary to make the project viable. Along with the engineering report supplied by Castle Glen Consultants, they also contend that the driving aisle width is adequately safe for vehicle turnovers. And the Department of Public Works has also assessed the operation safety and found it to be acceptable as well. So under that basis, it does meet the general intent of the zoning bylaw because it does maintain the safety of pedestrians and drivers as well. Next slide, please. Now, the second test is if the application is desirable and appropriate. Now, the subject property sits on a constrained site and has already been approved for a zoning amendment in 2020 for high density. The property also is situated close to Highway 29 and sits across from Settlers Ridge Mall, which includes the Anchor Food Basis grocery store and the Smith Falls and District Collegiate Institute, demonstrating that it is within a desirable location. Proposal presents an individual opportunity to provide additional apartment units in that area, and their planning rationale articulates that it is the best use of land, and the requested relief increases the neighborhood's density. The viability of the proposed development hinges on the relief of 0.7 meters being given for the driving aisle width. The criteria listed above demonstrates that the proposed development is an appropriate and desirable location for future residents. Next slide, please. Now, the last test is whether the minor variance application is minor in impact. Now, I will say that the minor variance is minor in scale, being that it's 0.7 meters of difference for driving aisle width, but it does have a major impact because it does affect the drivers and the pedestrian safety. Now, the engineering report written by Castle Glen has been reviewed by staff and found to be acceptable on the basis that the requested relief is expected to be minor as the safety of pedestrians and drivers are maintained. Moreover, with regards to the safety, 0.6 meters is the widest driving aisle width prescriptively required by the Ontario Building Code to support vehicles used by the fire department. So on that basis, it is minor in impact. Next slide, please. And here are some options for the committee. The committee can either approve the minor variance based on the evidence presented, or they can reject the relief request based on the evidence presented. What would happen next is that the applicant will have to adhere to the 6.7 meters driving aisle width if the request for relief is rejected. And one possible outcome of that would be that they would have to adjust their design concept for the proposed development to accommodate the 6.7 driving aisle width. Next slide, please. The recommendation is for the committee is that that the decision shall apply to permit the requested relief for 0.7 for the driving aisle width as detailed on the site plan. And the applicant shall obtain a permit for the structure on the condition of demonstrating fire access routes on the revised site plan. That's everything. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
I'll now open the floor to the applicant to provide any further information or comment on the public concern, or no, just a minute, I missed this spot here. Okay. I'll now begin hearing from members of the public. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. If you have signed in with the recording secretary and have requested to speak to this application, I will call on you by name, one at a time, to offer your feedback. Darlene Graham.
No comment.
Okay. Tracy Mantle.
My concerns, actually, I noted on paper in my letter, so I think that was sufficient.
Thank you.
Everyone has a copy, or they've read the letter that I wrote. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Actually, who is the owner of the property?
I'm here, Dave Simpson. It's
Okay, thanks, Dave. Yeah, I maybe came in a little bit later, so I wasn't made aware of who the owner of the property was. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else? There's somebody on an iPhone. Just hang on, Bill.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
There it is.
hello?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure if you're talking to me. It's Dave Simpson, the applicant.
No, there's someone else on an iPhone here that,
Okay, sorry.
There it is again.
hello?
Hello, John. That could be me. It's Gail Brennan. I'm just observing.
Okay. Thanks, Gail.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'll now open the floor to the applicant to provide any further clarification or comments on the public's concerns.
Hi, it's Dave Simpson again. I don't think that there's any further comments that I can make.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
I'll now ask for any questions or comments from the committee members. Bill,
It's my contention that this get together is strictly to talk about the width of the parking space and has nothing to do with the total development. Is that correct?
yes, Bill.
So that all of our discussion then is about taking 0.7 meters from the width of the parking space.
Yes.
And it seems to me that we have been advised by the town's committee that there is no real difficulty with that concession.
Anyone else have any comments? Questions? Wendy?
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Whitmire. Nothing, I've read the letters, we all have, but it's unrelated to this. The concerns are unrelated to this particular variance, so I have no objection to the variance.
Anyone else? Any comments, questions? Jay?
Yeah, nor do I. It's 0.7 meters, which in my own imperial calculations is 3.5 inches. So it's not a big thing. And this is what we're talking about tonight. It's not the overall development, which has already been talked about at this committee.
Thanks, Jay. Okay, if there's no more questions or comments, I'll now, the committee is tasked with making a decision for the minor variance application. If the committee is ready to do so, I will now entertain a motion.
So moved.
Moved by Bill, seconded by Wendy. All in favor? Carried.
Mr. Chair, I know people are joining in for not unrelated to this. So is there a process by which they can voice, get questions to some of their answers from our planning staff perhaps, or the owner themselves?
Well, I think if they check with through Carl at the planning in the planning office at the town hall.
Yeah, they may be able to have some of their concerns alleviated or questions answered.
Yeah. Carl?
Yes, thank you, Councillor and Mr. Chair. Yes, so there have been certainly planning staff have reviewed a number of valid questions and concerns with respect to design elements, and certainly the importance that we hear loud and clear of protecting the privacy behind the existing homes along Van Horn. So assuming the variance is approved by the committee in a moment, that's not the final planning approval that needs to happen. There is still a site plan control process which is underway, and site plan control is the planning tool that really gets into the details of design, of landscaping, of buffering and screening, and certainly through that process, which the committee will review a site plan application and provide feedback as well on that to us. But from the staff end, we would certainly be encouraging the proponent to implement whatever screening and buffering can be that can be achieved there. I understand that there is no intent to really change or alter the grade behind the existing townhomes. I think certainly the applicant can clarify that if I'm incorrect, but I think there is the site plan control process is a very important process that will be coming up that really will address these very important concerns and valid concerns that we have to do our best to make sure that this development that does fit in with the surrounding neighborhood context, keeping in mind that the principle of the use has been approved through the zoning amendment a couple of years ago, and now we're at the design stage.
Thanks, Carl.
Carl, it's Dave Simpson, and I can concur with what Carl said. I've spoken with some of the neighbors along in the townhouses, and we certainly have no intention of changing behind the townhouses. And it seems that they would prefer to leave it as natural as it is now and continue to mow it.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending and participating in the planning process of application MV-22-03. Any participants that have not signed in or require further notice regarding the application are asked to please reach out to Planning Clerk Mary Remig by phone at the Town Hall. Appeal rights as prescribed by the Planning Act will be outlined on the notice of decision. If you have any questions on this application or the process, I invite you to get in touch with our planning staff. This concludes the meeting portion of the public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. We will now move on to the next item on our agenda. Item number 6, priority issues. Report PAC-22-29. And I'll pass things to Carl Renke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just quickly summarize the purpose of the report and open the door to committee discussion. So as the committee may be aware, Council has directed us to look at all of the committees of Council. I think the last number I heard was perhaps upwards of, I don't remember the number, but it's a large number, perhaps a couple of dozen committees of Council that have been tasked with performing various functions. Some of these committees meet more often than others. I think the Planning Advisory Committee is certainly one of the more regularly meeting committees. And as noted in the report, the terms of reference for the Planning Advisory Committee give both statutory roles as well as an advisory role. So the Planning Act gives municipalities the authority to establish committees. As a single tier municipality, we're required to have a planning advisory committee. The Act doesn't tell us what the committee needs to do, though. But that is my understanding is the Act requires this sort of as an additional level of oversight as a single tier municipality. So when that change happened, we sort of created the Planning Advisory Committee and merged it with the Committee of Adjustment that has an approval authority role under the Planning Act for minor variances and consents. So the way so the purpose of the current PAC is sort of to provide a one-stop shop for all Planning Act matters, and that's including both the advisory and the approval. Trying to meet on a monthly basis as best as possible has given the public, staff, as well as committee members sort of certainty as to when we hold the meetings, rather than just open-ended with no certainty when the next meeting has happened. So I think in our view, that has worked fairly well. But I think we are reaching the end of the term of this committee, and we are looking to update the terms of reference for the next committee of Council. And we welcome feedback from the Planning Advisory Committee as it's currently constituted as to what you feel works, what you feel doesn't work, and or can potentially be improved upon. So through the report outlines a couple of different discussion topics for the committee, and we'll certainly welcome your feedback on that. We don't know when these decisions are going to be finalized. Ultimately, they'll need to be approved by the new council, but staff will be bringing forward a recommendation, and our recommendation will be informed by the discussion and feedback we receive from you. So I think a couple of pieces that we're welcome, that we'd appreciate your feedback on. One is there value in breaking apart the committee, creating a Planning Advisory Committee that focuses specifically on the advisory role, where we host zoning and official plan public meetings, make recommendations to council, act as a steering committee on certain policy matters, with a separate Committee of Adjustment that is strictly limited to its decision-making role and would probably meet a lot less than we have now. It does allow for a little bit of specialization in creating setting the committees. The drawback, of course, is we can't necessarily assume, and this goes across the board, we don't typically have, we don't always get the volume of applicants that we want for the committees to let us. We can't assume we're going to have a large range of qualified applicants to fill 2 committees. So if we go to 2 committees, there is that risk. But I think certainly I welcome the committee's feedback as to whether we feel that's desirable. Also, the right ratio of council members to the public. That's the current terms call for 2 to 3 councillors, 4 to 5 public members. Is that a good ratio? Do we feel and certainly I look to the council representatives on this committee, do we feel that council's adequately represent, like, would you like to see more council, a higher council proportion on this committee? The other item is committee composition. So right now, the terms of reference look for a variety or a diversity of professional, community experience and technical expertise. I think what some town committees do is they look for specific targeted roles. So like a youth member, a member from an environmental group, a member from the development community. Like my recommendation, my first thought is we retain the flexibility that we have now, but certainly I welcome feedback as to whether we want to target certain sectors within our terms of reference. The site plan review role, staff have identified the need to certainly work with ourselves and the new committee to clarify and confirm our role with the committee's role in terms of commenting on site plan applications, and certainly we welcome feedback from the committee on that. The other point is expanding the advisory role. I think the zoning, the work that the committee took in reviewing the zoning bylaw was an excellent example of I think good committee work, where a lot of details were workshop direction was given. There was a lot of back and forth, and ultimately I think that the good work that the committee put in reviewing and advising the zoning review, I think led to an easier process at council, since this committee got into the weeds a little bit more in terms of the policy, whereas once it finally made it to council, they seemed to be more comfortable to adopt it. And also the role of the staff liaison, and the role of the staff liaison here is to certainly record keeping, conveyance of information, providing professional recommendations. And I'm interested if PAC members feel a different or additional responsibilities would be helpful from the staff liaison, just from the planning department as a whole. So I don't have anything in mind, but I certainly welcome any feedback. So I think these points are all meant to be sort of open-ended, and I'll pause there. But in general, these are the items that staff have been pondering a little bit as we evaluate what we want the next committee, the planning advisory committee, to do. And I welcome any feedback from you on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Who's going first? Wendy.
Thanks, Carl. I don't have any frame of reference for what it used to be like for when you had a committee of adjustment. Maybe some of the members who have been on longer could comment on that, but I think it's worked fairly well in this last 4 years in terms of combining both the advisory and the decision-making role. I don't know that you could, I mean, we'll probably talk more about this stuff as we go through it, and I'm interested to hear if the members who've been on longer have any suggestions or opinions, but I think it's worked well this 4 years. I don't have any changes or wish to go to two committees as opposed to one. You did make a point of saying it's not always easy to get committee members for 30 some of the town's committees that are currently in place. So on that, I think it should probably stay one committee. In terms of right ratio of council to public, I don't know. I can't speak for Councillor Brennan, but I think 2 is good to have on. It certainly gives a level of confidence when we go back to council that there were two of us paying attention to what was done and participating in that. So I don't think there's a need for more. I also don't think there's a need for less. Committee composition, again, I would take a moment here to encourage people who watch this to get involved with this committee or any other committee on that the town has. These committees are important. We've seen it in action, certainly with planning advisory, that these are important considerations. It's important for people to participate in this part. You don't always have to be, you don't have to be sitting at council to have influence when you are on some of these committees. These committees influence council. So I would say that just to encourage more people to do that. I don't see the need to define who all is going to be on those committees, because part of the strength of this committee is that we are all community members. I don't think it needs, I came with zero experience in planning advisory, and I've learned a ton from my colleagues here, but it's also not rocket science. So I think anybody can participate on this committee, and I don't see the need to define it in saying you have to have this or that or the other thing. Site plan review role, that's always been one of my favorites in the last 4 years, is the site plan review. And I think we've made some good suggestions. This committee's made good suggestions. So I know nothing we say, council doesn't have to accept what we say, but I think it is helpful to both staff and council to have an opinion from this body. Expanding the advisory role, I don't know what else you'd give us, Carl. I feel like we commented on everything there was to comment on. Certainly zoning. I don't know what else you might get in there, but certainly I think some of the policy work has been very interesting, at least for me. And I would, if there's something related to planning advisory, then, or planning, then I think it's always good to get a second opinion from somebody like this body. In terms of the staff, role of staff liaison, I don't know what expanded role we could ask of staff. You already have enough to do. So I would say I'm reasonably satisfied with the role they currently play now. And those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. I might say that any comments I have, I definitely think there's not enough for two committees. It's been kind of evenly spread between planning advisory and committee of adjustment. And I don't think if there went to two committees, there wouldn't be enough to accommodate two committees. Well, one committee has worked quite well in my opinion anyways. Jacqueline?
Yeah, I agree, Mr. Chair. I agree that the one committee has worked well, and certainly more often than not with these larger developments, whether it's a minor variance or a rezoning, it's nice to be a part of that process from the start to the end at site plan approval. I think if it was split into two and you were just sitting on planning advisory and didn't know the intricacies that get figured out from what a committee of adjustments would do, there would be a lot of redundancies there. And like you said, Carl, more paperwork. So I agree with just one. To go on to the next point, Mr. Chair, just as far as the number of counselors and number of public, when you say that there's 2 to 3 counselors, Carl, is that for this one body, or is that broken down into the committee of adjustments? I just wanted clarification on that, Mr. Chair.
Carl?
Yes, thank you. The ratio that's set forward now is for the Planning Advisory Committee as currently constituted, and that includes both the Committee of Adjustment role and the advisory role, which is all forms part of the PAC's mandate.
Thanks, Carl. Jacqueline?
So, Mr. Chair, I mean, I have concerns about it being over 2. I think agendas could be pushed if there was more than 2 counselors on the committee. I mean, certainly hearing today that 2 is what everyone would like. I would almost go the other way and say it should be 1.
Thanks, Jacqueline.
That's my opinion.
From the start go, we always had 1. When I started, there was only 1 council representative. But I'm good with either way. The way it is, the way it has been for the last 4 years has been perfectly fine as far as I'm concerned. Jay?
Oops. Yeah, on the points, yeah, there's no need to break this up. I think when I started, there was no planning committee, it was committee of adjustment.
Yeah.
And at that time, we met very rarely. And things have changed a lot in Smiths Falls. So I think that your point, Carl, about getting people to sit on committees when we have so many, and I think that the group that I look before me is committed and not necessarily expertise. Some of us has more than others, but I think that we have a great group here, and I don't see the need to break it up and break out to another committee. In terms of counselors, 2 is more than enough. At the end of the day, decisions or recommendations made by this committee go through council. So, I think the 2 is good. It's workable. So I'm fine with that. I would say, if you want to talk about like who you want to consider to be on a committee, I mean, I'm looking at Jacqueline and John, who have experience in this sort of thing. That's great. I look at, Stephen and Bill, and they have life experience and they're committed to make good decisions. So I think that's great too. And myself, I'm not a planner, and I don't talk the planning talk, but I've learned a lot. And I think some good common sense and critical thinking is important. So I don't think that we should have to put a criteria on who we want on this committee, and we want people to be interested. So I think those are my comments. The site plan, I think, is an important function, and we can talk about what something's going to look like, and sometimes I think, maybe in my opinion, we get a little bit into the weeds, but that's okay. In terms of what color things are going to be or what kind of trees we're going to plant. But we can always put that in there, and we can talk about that at the time. So and as far as staff providing more support or more of a role, I don't know how much more you can do. You give us all the information, and usually well in advance, and I know that we all try to have a look at wherever we're talking about. So no, I think this is a really useful committee, and I think that the next council will see the benefit of it. And I don't see much change that is needed in terms of the terms of reference as you laid out. And thanks for doing that, Carl.
Thanks, Jay. Jacqueline?
That's it.
I agree with everyone, Mr. Chair, as far as the wording. I don't think it needs to be changed at all, but I will just make a note. I don't know what we would do without our surveyor on this committee. It's been, I mean, to have John and John's expertise has been, I mean, crucial and critical. So, like I say, I don't think that the wording should be changed, but I don't know what we would do without that kind of expertise.
Thank you. Anyone else? Bill? Chris?
No, everything that I would have said has been said. No need to repeat.
Stephen?
Yeah, I'm on the same page as Bill. The only reason I could see for separating it into two committees would be if we were running overtime too often. And I think the only time we were really running over was when we were reviewing the bylaw. So not a huge deal there. The one thing I would ask, just because I did come on, and I obviously don't have the experience that everyone else in the committee has, I came on fairly late. If it's possible to get kind of a history for the properties in those reviews. So say if they've already gone through approvals for something else or in the recent few years, it gives a good background for, and I'm not saying that this has happened, but say if a property had gone back and forth, changing things 3 or 4 times, it might change the way that we look at the third application or the fourth application for something.
Thanks, Stephen. Good point.
I felt like that today.
Carl, yeah?
Yes, thank you. And that was an excellent point, Stephen. Certainly, we will expand upon our backgrounds in reports to provide that history. Just to respond to a question that Wendy raised earlier with respect to sort of the steering committee role, and just as an example, it is we are undertaking a land need study right now that's going to be looking at potentially expanding urban settlement area boundaries, which may feed into an official plan update. So one of the roles certainly that staff are looking at potentially and bringing the committee in is providing, having the committee, the future planning advisory committee, serving as something of a steering committee, or at least providing direction or feedback on proposed policy options. So certainly council will make that determination as to whether they want to create a steering committee specifically for that purpose, or using the existing planning advisory committee for that role. But certainly there will be policy work we'll be looking at. We may be looking at non-statutory policies over the coming year as well, such as parkland dedication bylaw, site alteration, those sorts of things that are not, they're not necessarily, they're connected to Planning Act matters, but they're different from sort of the applications that we normally see. So certainly there will be policy work, and definitely we're interested in working with the committee to define, I guess, the new committee's role is going to be in providing us advice and guidance on that to assist in our presentations to council.
Thanks, Carl. So is there any other points on this item? We'll move on to item number 7, project updates. Are you doing that, Carl?
Oh, I can actually, I'm going to pass that over to Richard. Richard has a couple of project updates.
I do. Okay. So for SB 2214, that refers to blocks 18 and it's Margaret Graham Terrace, and those are 5 homes. And those have been, the site plan agreements have been drafted and been given to Parkview to be registered on title. The same can be cited for SP 2215, which is blocks 15 and 18, and then that's Whitcomb Crescent. And those are corner lots with 3 homes. So that's a total of 6 homes for that blocks 15 and 16. For blocks 25 and 26 of Whitcomb Crescent, those are also corner lots, but those are 4 homes. So a total of 8 homes. And they're also been registered for us. So they also have been given site plan approval and are being registered to title. So for a total of 19 homes.
Thanks, Richard. Item number 8. Mary gave me a date for the next meeting. You'll have to confirm your if ever your attendance on December 15th, 2022. Other than that, can I have a motion for adjournment? Moved by Jay.